Hello, I'm Tony and today I'm reviewing the Evoland Legendary Edition, which is free from Epic Games until the 27th of October 2022. This edition consists of two games, Evoland and, shockingly, Evoland 2. So what are they and are they worth getting? Let's find out. Well, nominally they are adventure RPGs, but it's not quite true about Evoland. So let's talk about that first. Evoland starts off looking like a Game Boy era RPG, more like an early Pokemon game than anything else. As you pick up chests in the game, you collect upgrades to your gameplay, which effectively turns it into a series of parodies or probably homages to the history of the CRPG genre. You get changes to your sound, your graphics and the gameplay, and it kind of evolves eventually into a mix of Final Fantasy VII and Legend of Zelda. Along the way there are a lot of funny comments about the various tropes and experiences these early games provided, and it gives you the opportunity to relive those tropes. It flips between 2D and 3D Zelda gameplay and Final Fantasy turn-based fights. Strangely, there's no real interaction between the two. I would say these sort of bit by bit addition of what I would consider basic gameplay mechanics left me at the end of the game wondering why I hadn't started with them to begin with. I mean, I realised why. It's because this isn't the point of the game. This game is there to talk about the development of ideas within the genre, making jokes about it. But it did leave the actual gameplay experience feeling a bit lacking. The history lesson is pretty entertaining and pretty funny, but it does come at the cost of gameplay here. I completed the game in about 3.5 hours. Well, I completed apparently 87.7% of it according to the end screen, so there isn't a lot to it. The puzzles are pretty straightforward that you have to solve, and there's no scope for any kind of strategy in the turn-based combat. You only have two characters and one of them's got one move and the other's got two for most of the game. This isn't so much a game as more a fond reminiscent about the early CRPG genre. You should get a fair few laughs from it without feeling any great need to finish the game, if you know about the history of games. Evoland 2 is a bit different. Once again, the developers are taking inspiration from early games and do that transition in between game styles, though there is a lot more focus on the gameplay and less on the commentary and humour. The primary gameplay mode so far through my playthrough has been a homage to the Zelda games. Top down, blocky 8-bit type graphics upgrading into a 3D world, which for some reason rotates as if the whole world were the size of a beach ball. I don't know what game that's referencing, but I didn't really like that shift. Very strange. The game itself is, as I said, a typical example of the genre though. It's got an interesting story and characters that are reasonable, although they do talk a little bit too much. I clicked through a lot of dialogue. There are some good puzzles here, but this section was about 3 hours long before it switched to something else, and it felt a little bit longer than it needed to be. It does change styles. Those changes are quite extreme. At one point I was playing an old-fashioned spaceship shooting game, which reminded me of the classic 1942 arcade game. There's another section where you play a Street Fighter clone, which did have the usual dragon punches and fireballs, using roughly the same combinations of controls. These are woven into the story pretty well. It's not jarring that these things come up, but it's obviously a big jump from solving plumbing puzzles to beating the crap out of a jacked up prophet. None of the sections were hard, but none of them were explained in any way at all. It took me a couple of tries at the shooting game before I realised I could use my companion's charged moves, which made a huge difference, made it much easier. The game never told me I could do that, never explained any of the controls. Equally with the fighting game, doesn't explain any of the controls whatsoever. Fine for me, but for people that are playing this game that haven't played all of these other types of genres, a bit confusing. It's hard enough that you can't just button mash, although jumping, kicking and jumping back work pretty well, by the way. The interesting part of this game is the story, is the main quest, and the problem with these other sections is that they last a little bit too long and they outstay their welcome. I found myself sighing when I realised there was another boss to kill, or another best of 3 fight to win, because I really just wanted to get back to the story. Evoland 2 trades out a lot of jokes and commentary for gameplay, and it's a better experience for it. If you want a standard Zelda clone that breaks the fourth wall and has humorous commentary on a bunch of old games, then you could do worse than give this a try. Overall, these two games provide a good laugh if you know a lot about the history of video games, and provides one decent Zelda clone. If I'd paid for the first one, I'd be annoyed because it's not really a game. The second one is definitely a game, but as a pair of free games, this is worth grabbing, I think. I enjoyed the first game's jokes and commentary. Just don't be expecting a game. The second one may interest all those Zelda fans, so that's why I'm kind of recommending it, with those caveats. I've realised that I remember all of the games they're talking about being released back in the day, so that probably means I need a nap. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.